do to address the many challenges that we face today. We're joined by historian Nick Ragone, author of the newly published book, Presidential Leadership, which looks not only at Teddy, but the broader category, if you will, of so many decisions, 15 of them specifically, that he saw as determinative to where we are in this country today. And Nick, what would Teddy think of today's events if you could channel Mr. Roosevelt?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for having me on, Dylan. I think he'd love today's action. I mean, as you know, as a history buff yourself, Teddy was a man of action. He loved to get into the middle of the arena. I think he'd look at the economy and jump headfirst into that and try to create jobs. But I think he'd look at world affairs, which is really what he loved, and get involved. You know, he was really the first president that conceived of America as a superpower. That's why he went ahead and created the Panama Canal. He believed we should have a two-ocean navy. So I think he'd look at this and relish it and jump in, you know, both feet.
One thing, and the reason I like Teddy as much as I do at this particular point in time, is he came to power at a point when there was tremendous change in America, the Industrial Revolution, lots of advancement resulting from that, and also tremendous consolidation of wealth and power that was resulting in incredible unfairness and wealth extraction in this country. Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, etc. And he obviously set out to address that as a reforming Republican. I believe we find ourselves now, again, tremendous change now, the digital revolution, and again, consolidated wealth and power. Is it too simplistic to think that that he would deal with the newly found consolidated wealth and power in our government the way he did back then?
No, I don't think it is too simplistic. I think, first of all, it's a great analogy, and you really have a grasp of his history. But I think what made Teddy Roosevelt special was he was not an ideologue. He was not inflexible. He was willing at times to buck his own party. In fact, it created a lot of friction with William Howard Taft, his successor. But he was happy to buck it if he thought it was right. He did it on trust busting. He did it on conservation. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from Teddy in our body politic, which is don't put ideology ahead of doing what's right. And I think that's what made him special. And I think that's why we still look back at him with a certain fondness. He wasn't afraid of taking on anybody.
He was also known for offering the so-called square deal, basically to try to give everybody a fair shake. And I would argue that is one of the most lacking things right now in America, is a square deal, where you watch Bill Daley, the new chief of staff for the president, take a $9 million paycheck out of J.P. Morgan, while you watch teachers taking a $24,000 pension, being asked to take yet another haircut. How would Teddy deal with the unfairness that seems so pervasive in our country today?
Well, he would deal with it today the way he dealt with it back then, which you put it, you know, he was a trust buster. He did not believe in concentrated power, as you mentioned, the Rockefellers and Carnegies and others. And he was not afraid to go after those in his own party and the industrialists of the day to create a fairer, flatter, more equitable system. And again, I think that, along with the Panama Canal, I argue in the book that the Panama Canal is his great legacy. But I certainly think we can look back to him and sort of see an example of how to govern and put ideology second and doing what's right first.
And how do you think this chasm has developed, whether it's on the Democratic side or the Republican side, where the simple politician, the simple sort of grassroots guy who says, listen, I'm going to give you a square deal, and I'm going to hold the big fat rich guy as much to account as I am the pension, the union guy who's taking the pension for a ride?
Well, you know, Teddy created the idea of the bully pulpit, and he believed the power of the presidency. In fact, one could argue that the modern presidency was really created by Teddy Roosevelt, and he was not afraid to go outside the political system, meaning using the pulpit and going to the people, much like Reagan and others have. And again, I think he would look at some of those issues that you described and go right to the people and create a popular consensus to enforce and back up what he wanted to do. He was very smart about that. He knew how to connect with people and use the power of the bully pulpit to make the change he wanted to see.
What do you think our current president, President Obama, could learn about Teddy Roosevelt, the bully pulpit, and the idea of a square deal?
Well, I think he could learn a couple things. One is be decisive. Teddy Roosevelt was, if not nothing, he was decisive. When it came to the Panama Canal, he said, let Congress debate it, I'm going to build the canal. And that's exactly what he did. He also believed in, you know, acting first and asking for forgiveness later. So he was very decisive, and he was also thoughtful and flexible in his thinking. And people overlook that. He wrote a bunch of books, well-received books. He was very intellectual, very thoughtful, like our current president, and he thought about what he was going to do, and then he used a bully pulpit to go right to the people and make the change that he wanted to see. And I think that's why he's right up there with Franklin Roosevelt and Lincoln and maybe Washington as the top 4 presidents of all time.
Listen, the book, Presidential Leadership, 15 Decisions That Shaped America. The author, you're listening to him right here, Nick Ragone. Nick, it's a pleasure to have you. There's the cover of the book. Happy President's Day to you, Nick.
Thank you. It's the best of all the holidays, by the way. Thank you, Dylan.
All right. Thank you. We'll take the